Hey everyone, it's Tom Kradza with another Rockstar Minute, and we're going to answer a question that came in, and this question is from Paula. Paula, it's a great question. We get this all the time, so here it goes. Stick with me. I'm going to read Paula's question so we're all on the same page. It says, many real estate investors preach how you can build your wealth in real estate by taking out the built-up equity from one property to purchase the next, and then you continue to do this to increase the size of your portfolio. Can't tell you how many times I've read about this. None of them explain how to do this, but at the same time continue to cash flow on the properties so you don't get into trouble. In most scenarios where investors put a minimum down payment, 5 to 20%, there is a very little net profit, and thus if you take out any equity, the property will no longer cash flow. Are we to factor in that new expense against the next purchase and make sure it cash flows? It's very tough to find a property where the numbers work. Are we amateurs missing something? First of all, you're not an amateur, we're all in this together. By you saying we amateurs, it makes us think we're professional, and we'd like to think we're all in this and learning together. Here's the thing, you're asking a great question, and that strategy of taking equity from one property and using it to buy another property is preached all the time, and it used to bother me too because I could never figure it out when I was reading it in all the books and reading about it or learning about different seminars that we were going to. But now we've done it. Here's the thing that most people don't share with you. It takes time. So you either need a property that creates an insane amount of cash flow where you can do it right away. So in those examples, Nick and I have both done them on student rental properties because student rental properties created a lot of cash flow. So if you buy it, you can then refinance it usually fairly quickly after you've purchased it. And by that I mean, 6 months to a year if the banks are going to let you, and pull out some equity if it's gone up a little bit since you bought it. And we've both done that. Nick and I have done that together. Nick's done it on his own. I've done it on my own. And there's enough cash flow from the student rental properties that they still cash flow and you're in good shape. On other properties, you need longer amounts of time typically. It's not like 6 months or a year. Sometimes it might take 2 or 3 years before you get that buildup in equity. And sometimes if the market's flat or down a little bit, it'll even take longer. So we never bank on when that's going to happen. What we found is when you start owning multiple properties, some of them pop with different amounts of equity at different times, and then the banks have lending programs that are maybe easier than they were a year ago so that you can now leverage that and take some equity out. So a lot of this is dependent on the property types, the cash flow, how stringent are the banks on lending, because sometimes they go really easy like they were in 2007, 2008. Now they're all a little tighter. And then there's other things to think about like the property type itself. So for example, there was a building that somebody we were working with was going to purchase right here in Oakville for about $1 million back in 2007. That building went from $1 million to $1.3 million in under 12 months because cap rates got squeezed really tight, went up in $300,000 in value, if you can believe it. The person who ended up buying that building, we found out, was able to refinance it and take out over $150,000 in newly found equity, and that property still covered its expenses. So a lot of this is, it depends on the property, it depends on the mortgages at the time. Sometimes you need to let a lot of time pass before you're able to do this. There's no one answer. But what I can tell you is sometimes you can force it to happen really quickly. Nick purchased a property where he went in, fixed it up, and that forced the appreciation. And within 4 months, he was able to get the bank to agree to reappraise it. They appraised it at a much higher value, took out all his money, and the property still cash flowed. But it's because he bought it at a low price, fixed it up, and then refinanced it. So a lot of things to think about, a lot of different variables. What I can tell you is if you start acquiring properties, some of them will build up equity sooner than others, and those are typically the ones you end up tackling, but it's not something you do overnight. Until next time, your life, your terms.